Right. Hello, thank you for being here. This is We Are Here Literature, and we're here today talking to Dr. Reverend Michael W. Waters, who wrote For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World. And we're going to interview him today to talk about his work with picture books, because not only does he have this one, but he has an upcoming one that we'll talk about, but also his life in literacy. Thank you for being with us here today.
Tiffany, it's a great joy to be with you, and Mike is fine.
Thank you. So what I like to do normally is I like to go back and kind of start at the beginning of when we talk about literacy. And like when you were in school, did you have a favorite book that you remember? What was your favorite book? And what
Wow. So I will tell you that probably if I was to offer a favorite book, it really was, I really did enjoy reading the Bible quite a lot. And so maybe as a singular book, that was my favorite book. But overall, I enjoyed history books. Anything I get my hands on related to history, whether it be biographies, whether it be just a recorded history, particularly Black history, even more specifically, civil rights history. I used to gobble that up as a young person. And that's really served me well for the work I engage in today.
Okay. So what were your reading experiences like in school? Were you immediately a good reader? Did it take time? Like, how did that work for you?
You know, I was a pretty good reader. As a matter of fact, for my first years of elementary school, I was always literally reading with the next grade level. Like they would come and take me out of class. So in kindergarten, someone would come get me, and then I'd go to the first grade reading class. And same thing happened in first grade. I went to second grade, same thing happened in third grade. So ultimately, after third grade, I went to a whole new school, talented and gifted school. I think it was in the first grade that I remember some teachers meeting with my mother, and they wanted to skip me a few grades ahead to third grade. And thankfully, my very wise mother said no, because I certainly wasn't mature enough for that type of promotion. But I always read at a very high level when I was in primary school. I enjoyed reading. I read, if I wasn't outside playing sports, and I spent a lot of time outside playing sports, riding bikes, football, basketball. If I wasn't doing that, I was usually reading.
Okay. Did you go to the library a lot? What were your library experiences?
You know what, my library experiences, I mean, they were there. I'd go to school library, of course. On occasion, we go to the local public library. But my mother really, my family, bought me a ton of books. Like I had a lot of books accessible to me in my home. And then my family members had a lot of books. And so if I wanted to read something else, I just go down the hall and grab something off the shelf. So books were almost omnipresent. Everywhere you looked, there was a book available. And on the coffee table, my mother, constantly reading. My father was a professor. I had a lot of educators in my family. So, reading was never something forced on you. It was almost like a birthright. There was always something there to read, and I enjoyed engaging in books.
That's awesome. We don't normally hear that experience, Nora, so to have it around you so much is great. So would you say that your mom was your reading role model, or who would be your reading role model if you had to say?
Yeah, she's absolutely one of them. Absolutely. Mother was well read, but I think everyone in my immediate family to some extent was well read, sometimes in different fields. Like my grandfather was a biology teacher, scientist, principal, then went on to become a county commissioner and county judge. So he's reading everything, right? He's reading governmental reports. He's reading, things of that nature, science things. My mother, would read a lot of fiction, and so she'd have a lot of novels around. So I would say probably my mother, because that's who I primarily grew up with, would be a reading model. I have come to grow to recognize how much I grew up in a Renaissance home because of her. She was a musician, so she was playing music. on piano. There would be music playing on the stereo at the time, right? So home was always full of music. There's art everywhere, Black art, which I just love to this day. So I got that experience too. And again, none of this was forced on me. It's just the environment I grew up in, right? And then she was constantly reading. I think the only thing I remember my mother forcing me to do was when Eyes on the Prize came out. She forced me to watch that. It's like, boy, you're gonna watch this. You're gonna learn this history, right?
All our parents did that.
But everything else was more kind of cultivated. It was there, and it was accessible.
What I think is interesting about that too, because you had the visual literacy and the music literacy and also just the print book. So you did have a lot of early influence of that in your life, which really changes a lot in terms of experiencing the word and things like that. So I wanted to talk to you. So you're a pastor, and how did you make that decision, seeing how you seem to be around like my era, and music videos and pop culture and everything gives you, like this perception of Black men. And how did you just, come to the point of like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a pastor, and then this is me. This is what it is.
What faith has always been very close to me, and it's a faith that drives action, right? I will, testify. I come from a long legacy of a number of pastors and preachers in my family. So that was there. That wasn't the only thing there. There's a number of educators there. There are artists that are there. So, I think that really helped shape me, because it removed the boxes, right? You didn't just have to be one thing, right? Like for instance, my grandfather, right? I continue to say is the greatest man I ever knew, right? So he was like the science guy, biology guy, who integrated the graduate program at Iowa State. But he's also this coach who coached players who went to the NFL and NBA and was in the Black Coaches Hall of Fame. But he was also this musician who played jazz, but also played for the church. So, they were one and the same, jazz music, So all these, then later on again, was very, very involved in the NAACP, political action guy. So he wasn't just one thing, right? And then after doing all of that, was just this brilliant kind of handy guy who managed properties, and during the summers with him, we're painting, we're doing all that stuff. So that idea of, if you will, Black masculinity and what it meant to be a Black man, even a Black man of faith, really allowed me to enjoy, reading the Bible and Tupac, right? Like those weren't mutually exclusive realities, right? And that I could be a part of, Brand Nubian and Tribe Called Quest, and grow up in H-Town and Ghetto Boys and Screw, all that stuff, right? I can enjoy Aaron Douglas, I can enjoy James Weldon Johnson and Maya Angelou, right? As well as the Gospels. Like, it wasn't just this, you have to do this one thing. And so I think that's really something that I embody even, in my ministry, right? I personally see God everywhere. I think everything, or many things I should say, are an expression of divinity and of God. And I can see where God is present, right? So, when Pharrell Williams recently had a big event in Virginia Beach, they invited me to come out and to be a part of that platform, right? So I'm spitting with Kendrick Lamar tracks on the background, delivering a message of hope that integrated our faith with our history on the shore of the Atlantic Ocean, only about an hour away from where a portion of our people arrived in 1619. And so all those things are happening, but all those things are in me. And again, it's not mutually exclusive. Matter of fact, I think it all of it informs the work I try to do.
Truly does. And I wish that more of our kids could have that experience, because having the support and understand that what you see in books and can create around you, it's yours. Like all of this is yours. Everything that you see is a part of your culture as well. So, and I think it makes decisions so much easier when you can say, I'm allowed to be in these spaces. They're not,
Right.
you're not excluded from them. You're very much a part of those things. So that's amazing. So you do a lot of social justice work, and I see now where the roots of that, a lot
Yeah.
of that are from. But I think today, we do a lot of stuff on social media, and I think that that's
Right.
great because it does create an initial awareness. But how did you know that? Because I think it plays a part of your book too, your picture book. How does it play a part of being actionable? Like, when was that part in your life where you were like, I can't just, like, say it in this one space. I have to be actionable, and I have to, um, like, work in these. I have to work in terms of voting, and work in terms of protesting, and work in terms of these different areas. you know I can't sit back. Like, when was that point when you knew you had to be that person?
I appreciate the question. And I think it's still for me, it's heritage. It's what I saw, right? I didn't just see my people talking about it, they were about it, right? They weren't just talking about why we should vote. They were helping register people to vote. They were mobilizing the vote. They were active in civic affairs, right? They
Mhm.
weren't just talking about justice. My grandmother, when she was in college, and I actually found this out, interesting enough, I found this out at her 90th birthday, right? My grandmother just turned 93, but on her 90th birthday, they had a great celebration for her in her hometown at her church. They asked me to come and speak, and I did that. And while they were just talking about her biography, now, mind you, I've been with my granny for a long time, right? And she's an amazing woman, but it's only in that setting that I learned that in the 1940s, she led an integrated social justice movement in Austin and invited Thurgood Marshall to Austin
Mm,
and marched with him in the streets. I just blew my mind, right? So I
mhm.
knew some of the things that she was doing, but for some reason that story never was
Wow.
told.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was almost lynched in Mississippi.
Mhm.
The KKK came to his home when he was with the NAACP because of the work. I mean, these were people who were engaged. My father is a New Testament professor, one of the few Black New Testament professors in the country, and has looked through the Bible through an Afrocentric lens. And so, this is what I saw. This is what I grew up with, is that it's not just talking about it, it's being about it, being engaged, being a part of the change. And so when those opportunities presented themselves to me and to my wife and to our family, it's just something that we have to do
Mhm.
because we're in the very same struggle. And I think that's a very important point, is that the struggle hasn't ceased, right? I founded several years ago a civil rights pilgrimage to go to the Deep South, and I continue to lead pilgrimages to the Deep South, looking forward to being able to do it again post-COVID. But over the years, I've had a chance to sit and dine and talk with everyone from John Lewis, Andrew Young,
Yeah.
Amelia Boynton Robinson, Vera Harris, Jimmy Lee Travis, the list goes on, who have imparted to me lessons from their struggle that I attempt to apply today. And sometimes, frankly, where you serve and how you serve thrust you into the work in which you're engaged. So I am in Dallas, and very few people know this about Dallas, but Dallas is, and you can prove it by a data point, Dallas is the epicenter of white supremacy in America. As a matter of fact, I have a nonfiction book that the former presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke wrote the foreword to that came out earlier this year, called Something in the Water, 21st Century Civil Rights Odyssey. One of my chapters is entitled Dallas, America's Capital of Functional White Supremacy. So
Mhm.
Dallas is the most racially inequitable city in America. A lot of people don't know this.
Mm.
Urban Institute ranked the city of Dallas 274th out of 274 American cities in racial segregation and racial equity, dead last. But
Mhm.
we also make more new millionaires in Dallas than any other city, have the fastest growing business district in any other city. So it really is a tale of two cities, gross inequities, right, that are still manifest in COVID. And so my church is in the heart of the epicenter of racialized poverty in America, which then demands action, right?
Yes.
And so, everything I do is not just for my parishioners, but it's for our family, it's for our community. And you can't do that simply from a Twitter account or a post or a share or an Instagram post. You've got to be engaged and involved and consistently so to bring about change. And so that's what I've attempted to do. And I've been, encouraged to an extent by what we've done, but I know there's so much more work that we have to do.
So what would you say to, especially young Black males, because I would love to see, more of their voices involved. I think that their voices get slighted a lot, for those that are active. So what would you wish for young boys in terms of being involved in your community and being a social justice advocate?
I think the first thing is exposure. You can't underestimate that. I mean, that's a part of my story that I've already shared with you, right? It's a part of my formation. What I saw really expanded what I knew was possible, right? The possibilities were expansive, right? There were no limitations set in my mental sky. Solange talks about these, metal cranes that take up our space. There were no cranes in my sky, right? There was no limitations. Everywhere I looked was possibility. Now, it was a possibility born out of struggle, right? It wasn't simply that, every door is going to open for you. I saw that testimony through my family, friends, and others who were willing to press against those systems of oppression and marginalization. But it was pressing against it with the knowledge that I am worthy of this opportunity. I am prepared for this moment, and I can do this if given the opportunity, right? That comes through exposure, right? And that didn't have anything to do with, we weren't wealthy, right? None of that. It's about what's available, okay? It's what you see. And so, that's what I hope to do through my writing with my own sons and daughters, with young people, is to expose them, to make them aware of what is around them, to give them the tools necessary to discern and to analyze. But even as they do that, to empower them, to strengthen them with this knowledge that there's nothing that you can't do. And so I think that possibly, this is my opinion, that there are very few young people, especially young Black men, who are given such a purview, right? They're provided an opportunity to see limitless possibilities, even in the midst of oppression and marginalization. You got to give them both. They've got to know what's really in the world, but they've also have to recognize through our heritage and history what's possible even in the face of it.
Yes, wholeheartedly. So I want to pivot a little bit, because one of the things that I appreciated were the titles of some of your books, and you kind of like mesh hip hop well in terms of your spirituality. Can you talk especially about the similarities that you see between hip hop and being a pastor? Because to me it's obvious, but I think, when people see, this person in a pulpit, there is no way, but there's a history, and you know what I mean? And there's a history to this. And if you could share that, so like our young men could understand, the correlation between hip hop and what you do as a pastor.
Well, the oral tradition is so important to the diaspora, right? How we share and collect stories and pass them down, whether it be through words or music. It's how we communicate our story, right? And I think hip hop is a wonderful combination of all of those things, right? Because hip hop, and I've done a lot of research writing in hip hop, and one scholar talked about how hip hop raids, almost like steals from. I don't necessarily like that terminology, but the idea is that hip hop raids its elders' music and reinterprets it for a new generation. And that's really true, right? If you're listening to, just say Tribe Called Quest, right? And let me give you a quick story. So I'll never forget, I was a younger guy, and my favorite uncle, I'm hanging out with he and my aunt, and I want to put him on to some music, right? I'm like, I want to put you on in music, right? Because you're getting older now. which is interesting now. So I want to put you on to some music. I'll never forget. I like, put some music on. I think it may have been either Snoop Dogg or Dre, something like that. I want to put you onto this. And I'll never forget my uncle just smiling at me and just shaking his head. And I'm like, what? Don't you like it? So my uncle takes me home, and we get home, and he has a massive record collection, and he pulls out all these records, and it's the first time I've ever seen Parliament Funkadelic, and he drops the needle on it, and we bobbing, we're jamming, and then all of a sudden I start hearing, what I knew. I'm like, hold on, what's going on here? Like, my mind is blown. Mm-hmm. Everything I thought was new is not new. It's just been reinterpreted, right? Yeah. That's our history as a diaspora. That's the history of hip hop, but that's also the history of our faith. We take the ancient and reinterpret it for present communities, right? And we're telling stories that are from people in spaces that are far from us, but it's really not as far as you think if you know the story, right? So there's a direct parallel in my mind between what we have as our heritage, what we see manifest in hip hop, and what should be the role of faith, right? To make the ancient become alive anew. And then also have this historical reality that I personally think, if you look at the work of Dr. Anthony Penn and some others talking about the decline of the Black church, particularly following the assassination of Dr. King, in many ways, this indigenous art form made of Black and brown people in the South Bronx that is now this global movement really fills in the gap where the church fails. Okay, when the church comes into itself because of maybe fear or because of otherizing and didn't really want to embrace the struggle that was continuing to happen in America during this Great Recession and coming out of the liberation struggle, the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power movement, the church kind of goes into itself and it leaves young people vulnerable without support, without encouragement, and without the necessary tools to discern the times. And so hip hop kind of fills that space. If nothing else, it brings forth the struggle and speaks about the experience of the marginalized and the oppressed to let everybody know that not everybody's having a Jefferson's moment, right? We're not all moving on up to the east side, right? Some of us are still very much so in the struggle. And that's what hip hop does. So you got folk today, which blows my mind, they're acting like police brutality is this brand new thing. It just came out of nowhere. How did we get here? And we're like digging the crates because the crates will tell you the story. And they've been telling you the story, right? Yeah. So, I said a lot there, but I don't see a lot of differences between the role of the rapper, the role of the DJ, the role of the hip hop aesthetic versus the liturgy work, prophetic witness of the church. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to even take it here. I think the most important theological statement of the 20th century, the whole century, was given by Tupac Amaru Shakur, who asked the question, is there a heaven for a G? That is the most important theological inquiry of the 20th century. We can wrestle with that from so many different ways, but I think it is so vitally important that we give hip hop, which is frankly the greatest cultural movement in the world, I think the last 50 years, its proper seating to really unpack this meaning and importance for us today.
Even with I heard the message the other day, and it's different for me now. You know what I mean? Because I was listening to it because of the beat and a few rhymes here and there, but just in terms of, that song, What's Happening Now, I was like, what's changed? What's changed? Right. You know what I mean? And just just being titled The Message, that's what you do. You know what I mean? That's what you do. You're still trying to get people to understand, lessons and messages that have been happening all through time.
It's a genius song, right? Broken glass everywhere, right? That's when it drops. And you can exegete that all you want to, but we know about the broken glass theory and how policing has manifested in our communities. And just that line of love, broken glass everywhere, it's just mind-blowing. And it speaks to the genius, because we got to really think about it,
Yeah.
that these are still young people, right? These are young people, and their genius is transforming the world. They just need a platform, and they create their own platform to begin to share these stories. So again, I just, I'm troubled by what has historically been the church's dismissal, because it's not as pristine. The language is not what they desire. The image is troubling. I think it's Tracy Rose, Dr. Tracy Rose, who talks about the fact that, when everyone was talking about gangster rap, they weren't talking about the fact that America itself is gangster. When you look at how violence has shaped not only our nation, but our foreign policy. So gangster rap may in fact be a reflection of the society in which it's in, and not necessarily, as they tried to suggest, the pathology of the people, right? So I think hip hop is liberatory. I think that we can even, and I'm working on a book trying to do this now, I think you can almost canonize hip hop. I think they're hip hop saints, right? I think we have the wisdom literature of, say, a Lauryn Hill, right? I think you have the narrative gospel of a Scarface, right? I think you got the prophetic literature of a Rhapsody or a Kendrick Lamar, right? And I think, frankly, if we're able to connect the dots, we would, those who serve in ministry and serve in the church, could open up the possibilities for engaging our society.
Thank you. And in terms of literacy too, that's why I think I'm pushing for literacy so much, because when I think of the message and people that I grew up, KRS-One,
Oh yeah,
look at that brilliance. Look at
brilliance.
that brilliance. And those were kids who, when they went to school, teachers cast them aside or didn't think, you know what I mean?
Right.
Nas, it was those special teachers who were like, you have a gift. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you look at Nas now. You open up the door, so you got to close it. You got to close it, right? But Nas grows up in a Renaissance too, even in Queensbridge, right? With his father, early introduction to hip hop, right? That's important to his story, that we don't miss that. That is that early introduction that really helps and shapes and informs him. You look at a Q-Tip. One of my favorite lines from Electric Relaxation, talking about mice to men, right? He's dropping the fact that I'm on something greater, right? I've been introduced to it. Don't sleep on me. And even, rest in peace, Shock G. They've uncovered a interview with Shock G, was talking about the lyrical jazz essence of Biggie's flow, right? And come to later discover, I saw this in a recent documentary, that and I can't recall the name right now, but a jazz musician initially embraced Biggie in an attempt to make Biggie a jazz musician. Biggie doesn't go in the way of jazz, but that masterful flow is still born out of that, right? That's powerful. And so, we got to give props to young people. Young people have always been at the forefront of movement, changing, demanding change. They still are today. And if we can teach our history and present in this way, which I hope I'm attempting to do, it can serve an inspiration to young people who are coming of age now, that they don't have to wait until they're an adult to make a difference, that right now they have the genius and power to begin making change in our society.
And I appreciate you entitling one of your books, The Stakes is High, because I went back to crates on that one with J-Law, so I appreciated that. So
a meteor has more rights than my people. I mean, that's just it's classic. It's beautiful.
So I wanted to talk about this book for a moment. And you centered your son in this book, for beautiful Black boys who believe in a better world. What made you decide to write a children's book? Because you normally, it's your other books were kind of for an adult crowd.
You know what? It's parenting. Parenting moves you into different spaces and has new demands on you. I mean, I never set out to be a children's book writer. That wasn't part of my ambition or desire. But the moment that shifted it, I've done a lot of work with the victims of police brutality and their families. and my son, who's now getting ready to turn 15, he's seen a lot of that over the years, right? He's seen our church host a conference of Mothers Against Youth Genocide, where the women filling the space are women and sisters who have lost loved ones to police brutality. He's seen me stand beside, the victims of police brutality at the county courthouse, in the streets. Like, this is something that he's seen on numerous occasions. He's seen me do the press spots and all that kind of stuff. But I think what changed is that a young man by the name of Jordan Edwards died in our community. He was killed by a police officer, 15 years old, brilliant A honor roll student. Not that that mattered to, the value of his life, but A honor roll student, star athlete, killed, shot indiscriminately by a police officer while he was sitting in the vehicle. Made no sense, right? And we hosted a big citywide event and vigil and direct action training after his death. We had leadership from the National NAACP come in town, all that kind of stuff. And the family, there was a vigil where he lived in Bolton Springs, and I was invited, which, I am frequently invited to come and speak in these spaces. And I will tell you that of all the spaces that I've spoken at, and unfortunately, I've had to speak in a lot of tragic spaces after a lot of tragedy. But this may have been the most gripping because it was basically a field of young people, right? This is a high school freshman who's killed, and the people who gather are primarily his classmates. And there was a heaviness and a weightiness there, seeing all these young people whose hearts are broken, not just at the loss of their classmate, but their sense of safety is disturbed, right? And I'm getting ready to speak, to have us lined up together, those who are going to speak for the evening. And I look over and I see my wife at the time, our two daughters, and my son. And when I look across, I just kind of keep looking at him, and I can visibly see, your children, how troubled he is. So I do something that I had never really done before. Even in that moment, I'm trying to parent. So I say, come stand with me. And I put him up under me, and I'm a kind of big guy, tall guy, right? So he's kind of envelop him to try to reinforce a sense of protection, right? But he's still very disturbed. There's actually Associated Press picture floating around somewhere of him kind of under me, and I'm kind of whispering in his ear. Later that night, and it's depicted in the book. We get home, my wife and I were retiring for the night. We put everybody to bed, look up, and he's in the doorway. And he's visibly, troubled. And, it's like, what's going on, son? And he just starts saying, I'm tired of folk killing each other. I'm tired of all these things happening. And it then demands a conversation. Well, I don't even know if it's a full week later, my wife and I, we were getting ready to go speak at a conference in Los Angeles, and we're on the plane, and that conversation I think I was going to work on something else, but that conversation, that moment just kept playing back in my mind. And for me, one of the things that I do when, I'm wrestling with thoughts, trying to get something out, I have to write. I just got to dump it out. And so I start writing something. And by the time we're getting ready to touch down, I hand it to my wife. I say, I think there's something here. And she looked at it and she said, I think you're right. Got back from the conference and, typed it up because I'd written it by hand. And I sent it off to a woman I knew who was in publishing. And I said, just check this out. I did this. It's totally different than anything I've ever done. And maybe 10 minutes later, she hit me back, direct message. She said, Mike, I'm crying. You got to do this. And that's how it came, right? So it was not, again, any ambition. It just came out of our own experience. And what I have later learned, particularly from this book, is that so many parents, obviously, are struggling about this conversation of violence, gun violence, racial violence, police brutality. How do we have these conversations in a way that is uplifting and empowering for our children? And I'm grateful that from our own experience now, this book exists, and I'm very grateful for the reception it's received.
And great illustrations too. I just wanted to show this is one of the pages here. Is there any symbolism here to this?
Yeah. So first shout out to Keisha Morris,
Yes.
who I did a dynamic job with illustration. They're warm, they're engaging, they're accessible. So my son, a jack of many trades, does a lot of things, but when he was, I think maybe 6 years old, 7 years old, I just got him for one Christmas, got him a stocking stuffer. He had all the other gifts, right? But just I came across something, which was an origami book.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, oh, it's, I knew he liked art, maybe something he'll play around with it. And he became this origami master. Like there's nothing he can't make. And he's even, when he was what was 9 or 10 years old, they had an art show near downtown in Dallas, an art gallery, and he was invited to display his origami. I mean, it was so dope, right?
Yeah.
And so I asked, when they were putting the book together, particularly because it's based really on our family, they asked him some questions about, him and about some things he liked. And I said, there's no way anybody that knows Jeremiah, it's my son's name, Michael Jeremiah, they know, he doesn't do it as much anymore as he used to. But early on, they knew he was, doing origami. And the thing about my son, which I love to this day, is one of the things that he would do when he met a new friend or met someone for the first time, he would really quickly make them something and gift it to them, right? Mm-hmm. And which was it just speaks to his heart. He'd make this, a swan or something, right? So there are people all over the country, right, who have these little Jeremiah originals. But that's why that's there in the book.
Okay, I was curious, and then too, like origami is not easy. That's the
it's not no
analytical skill, and this is the teacher in me seeing this and pulling this out. Like there's a visual and analytical skill that goes along with doing origami that, like it, and it's so intricate. So that's incredible. I appreciate that. So when you were, okay, so how do you balance that trauma with hopefulness? And I think that's something that, like, especially with young people, when you're getting them involved with this, and I think within their span, because I have a daughter who's 20, for example, she's seen nothing but these things visually. So It's like, what's your advice in terms of hope versus reality when dealing with these issues in your book?
Sure. Well, I mean, a part of my communication of hope and the call to manifest hope does come from a rooted place of faith, right? That is a very big part of the depictions of hope. But I also see hope as it is present in history. And I think we do an injustice by not teaching the presence of hope as we see it in our forebears, right? The only reason they made it is because of hope. That's it. I mean, they had a hope and belief that as bad as things were, and they were horrible, that it would not always be like this. And you see that hope communicated in song, you see it communicated in writings. They believed that at some point things could change. And it wasn't just this wishful hope on a star, right? It was a hope that actualized, that manifested itself through their work and through their witness. And that's what I try to communicate, right? The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That's true. It's very long. I add to that, it bends towards justice, but only if you bend it. Okay. And I believe oftentimes, at least I attempt to communicate it, is that frequently we're the hope that we're seeking, right? It's our actions that bring about this hope. And so, even in our communication of history, which I'm very big on trying to communicate it and contextualize it. These are hope-filled people out of some very tragic spaces, but they're hope-filled people, right? I recently, and I'm grateful, she endorsed my last nonfiction book, but I've developed a relationship with Sarah Collins Rudolph. Sarah Collins Rudolph was the fifth little girl in the 16th Street bombing in 1963. Her sister, Ada Mae, was killed. All of her friends were killed. She was in the threshold of that door She lost an eye in that bombing. For years, the debris that embedded in her skin would surface, which is very painful, right? But I've sat and talked with her and her husband and been present with her, and she's the most joy-filled woman in the world, full of love, full of forgiveness, even as she still demands justice because she's not been done justly by the state of Alabama at all. She's not received the type of support that she really needs. And to see someone who has literally been bombed and suffered psychological, emotional, physical trauma arrive at a point in her life where she is full of love and grace and compassion and still justice oriented, to me, that is hope. I mean, that possibility that somebody like that exists is hopeful for me. And that's how I try to connect that history, right? It's not to dismiss the very real pain and trauma we've come through, but the fact that we're still here. Black people, in my opinion, right, are a portrait of hope. Like, there's no way we should have gone through all that we've gone through, go through all that we've gone through right now, and be able to do the things that we're able to do to transform our society and the world, to be the purveyors of all that is cool and all that is hope-filled, and then then invent stuff that saves humanity, right? We're a sign of something greater. You know, for me, that connects to faith. But that's the hope that I seek to express to others. And you know, thing is if you lose hope, if you move into a nihilistic space, I think you're defeated. If you allow your hope to diminish, right? So even now, where we have generations, like you said, who've seen, you know, nothing but pain, trauma, hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. Even in that, I see a burgeoning movement for justice that could get right what we've not been able to get right up to this point.
Very well said. And I want to say with this book too, in the back, it's an amazing guide back here for teachers and librarians and parents to help navigate these difficult conversations, especially in these times where people want to dismiss parts of our history message in classrooms. This is this book in itself and the guide provides a very accessible and universal way of discussing these issues, because in the end it comes down to humanity, right?
Well, let me give a shout out to the Ali Center that put that together. One of my great joys, again, you know, it's amazing how it happened, but Lonnie Ali, Muhammad Ali's widow, the manuscript got before her. She checked it out. She said, I want to be a part of it. We're going to have our center, our educational department come on board. And the guide that they created, I think, is just amazing. And I'm thankful that not only do you have the narrative to read, but you have the resource to help you in creating safe space.
Wholeheartedly. So you have a new book coming out called Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip. Can you talk about that as well?
Yeah, so my wife and I are now the parents of 4 children. The latest one snuck up on us in the pandemic. His name is Justice. So we have Jeremiah, Hope, Liberty, and Justice. Liberty was the baby girl. And as I mentioned, I've led civil rights pilgrimages through the Deep South for years. And coming up on the 50th commemoration of Dr. King's assassination, I led a group of multi-faith leaders from Dallas. I was then serving as the co-chair of Faith Forward Dallas, which is the largest multi-faith justice movement in our region. And a group of us went on this pilgrimage. And my wife was present, and we decided to take all of our children. And my friend and brother, Imam Omar Suleiman, he took his daughter and his son, and they were the youngest persons on the trip. And, you know, I've led this pilgrimage for years, taking all kinds of groups, college groups, church groups, old, young, you name it, but never had so many young people on the trip. And I think at the time, Liberty may have been 5, and she was the youngest in our family. And Abdullah is Omar's son. He was 4. And Tiffany, when I say seeing the history through their eyes was transformative, it almost feels like an understatement.
Mhm.
You know, the way they took in what they were seeing, right? And processed it, and the questions that they asked. But the hope that they still held was transformative, right? It blows your mind to see children where Emmett Till was killed. But that's what we saw, right?
Yeah.
To see children where these 4 little girls were bombed, to see children put their hands in craters left by bombs, and to walk past all these spaces and yet still have hope, right? For liberty to come to me when we were at 16th Street Baptist Church and say, Dad, I don't like that they killed those girls. That troubles me. That shouldn't happen. And for us to have a conversation about 16th Street to Mother Emanuel AME Church and what we need to do to protect our houses of worship. But then the very next moment, to see these children climbing trees in Kelly Ingram Park where they turn water hoses and dogs on us. That's amazing. That's hope-filled. That just blows your mind that a place of trauma can be transformed by these young people. And so once again, Tiffany, I didn't set out to write a book, but I'm just thinking about this experience when we got home. It just stayed with me that, wow, this is amazing.
Mhm.
And before I knew it, Liberty Civil Rights Road Trip was there, which serves as an early introduction to civil rights history for young people that also roots that history in our present struggle uh, for hope-filled reality. So again, I'm excited. I'm grateful it comes out in October. And as a part of my work, everything that I do, I hope it serves a greater good. So I am now the vice chair of Foot Soldiers Park in Selma, Alabama, which is transforming the very place where our forebears marched for our voting rights into an educational park, educational center, museum. Harvard's Hudson Center is on board there, a few other partners. Again, it's my honor to be a part of this work. And a portion of the proceeds for the sale of the book go in support of Foot Soldiers Park. And I should say a portion of the proceeds for Beautiful Black Boys Who Live in a Better World have gone to 2 organizations. One, the Bolton John Foundation. Bolton John was killed here in Dallas while in his own living room by a Dallas police officer, as well as Mothers of Black Boys United, that organization that emerged following the death of Mike Brown to support their efforts in justice.
And I'll be sure when I put this up on our site to put those links in as well.
Thank
What
you.
I appreciate too is that you have something that people would consider a deficit, but you also have the asset approach. So I appreciate the balance in that, because I think one of the hardest lessons that a lot of our majority teachers are going to have to learn if they're thinking about teaching anti-racism is finding the asset in it, and the joy and things like that while they're teaching this history that they may not be as familiar with. So I appreciate your approach and always thinking that way, because we have to get our teachers who may not be familiar with our culture and our librarians to start thinking in that realm as well. That there is a joy in these stories as well as in our history that needs to be brought out as we deal with these things and survive and persevere
Right.
as well. I need to ask you one more. I have 2, but one that rings true with Beautiful Black Boys. Can you talk about how you establish communication with your kids? Because you there was a point in your book where you were like, we're going to wait for him to come and talk about this. And how do you get your kids, to ask these questions and you know what I mean, to share what they have to say? What have you and your wife thought about in terms of creating that environment?
It's about accessibility and openness, which is born out of relationship, right? You can't wait for the tragedy to happen to try to establish those communication lines. That's about checking in, frequently. Hey, how's it going? How was your day? What's going on, right? And listening intently to what's said and even what's not said. To not force a conversation, that they might not be ready for, but to keep the door open so they know that when they're ready, it's there at any time, whether it's late at night, whether it's early in the morning, we're here to listen. It's not to have these ready-made solutions to these unconscionable problems, right? Not to tell my son when he comes in to our room late at night that, don't worry about it, everything's gonna be all right. Well, no, there's some troubling stuff. I understand to say, yeah, we're tired of that too. Let me show you what we're attempting to do, right? To remove that sense of powerlessness from the conversation, like what can we do, and show that there's a history of people doing things to bend that arc, right? To acknowledge, no, not everything is perfect now, but when we can go in a restaurant and take a seat, most times, unassaulted, unmolested, that's somebody did something for us to be able to do that, which means we got to guard it as well. Taking them to vote. Every time we vote, it's a family experience, right? And that's a conversation as well. It's a conversation in civic responsibility, but it's also a conversation in our history. And so now, I was just early this month, I was arrested in DC, engaging in civil disobedience with regards to our rights to vote, right? So when I'm having a conversation with our children about it, okay, daddy got arrested. Why? What's the importance of it? What's the legacy? What's the heritage that come out of? And why do we do it now to protect what we've got to guard for tomorrow, right? I think it's about opening, being open. And that sounds cliche, but it really is true, right? To be vulnerable as well, which I think parents have a hard time being, to be able to tell your child, I don't know, right? When we were watching everything happening on January 6th with the insurrection, and they're asking questions, I'm like, I don't know. We got to see what's going on. I'm not going to give you just this ready-made, I don't know. And be fine with that and struggling alongside your child towards those answers, So I think the book is a reflection of that, just to be very honest about what you see, share to the extent that they're willing to share. And once it's very clear that, okay, I've got my feel, say, okay, we'll pick this up at another time, and trust that when you keep on with that engagement, each time you're building towards, something greater.
I swear I'm winding down, but you touch on such good points here. Do you, with your kids in technology, do you have to struggle getting them to, read books, or is it, like you have to engage them differently?
Yeah, so each child is different. They are. My oldest, Jeremiah, is very much so like me. Like he will read very quickly. Liberty, a little bit too. Hope is a little bit different. She's very, she does math and science, like that's her favorite subject. She's not as big on reading, but she also engages, like, she dances and music and things of that nature. So she engages things in a different way, right? So, now I say all that to say that that's their kind of predisposition. Now, mama don't play that. My wife, you're going to put down that device and you're going to read something, right? So that is a part of our household. Like, pick up a book, read it, let's talk about it, that does happen. But, a few of our children are more given to picking up a book and reading than others.
And that's a reality too. I'm a librarian and a teacher, and it was a struggle. It got there, but it was a struggle. And I just want people to realize that, it's a job to get kids. It's a job.
Yeah. And they're all, and I'm thankful they're all doing exceptionally well in school, particularly during the pandemic. They're doing well, they're engaged, they just have different ways of engaging. Yes. But we try our best to, I often buy books, that's frequently. You're not just going to get a toy. You're not just going to get a new video game. That comes with it. We're going to do that too, but you're going to get a book. And it's always cool to see them pick up something new that I got them and see them engage it.
Last question. In your opinion, what needs to happen to engage Black boys and young Black men with literacy?
You know what? Again, it's about making it accessible.
Mhm.
You know, I will tell you that one of the joys of A Beautiful Black Boys was, when it came out, I started receiving all these pictures on social media of young boys. Matter of fact, I got so many of it, we kind of made it a little social media campaign. Parents were sending me these books of these young guys holding the cover, like smiling beside her, holding it with pride. And I get little stories, which I thank everyone who sent it. They say, my son loves this book so much. As soon as he comes home, he runs and grabs a book. He's not even reading it. He's just holding it plain, right? What I learned was that because they could see themselves in the protagonist, in the character, it made it accessible, made them want to read it. Here's a young man growing locks who looks like me. It's accessible, right? I think a part of the problem is that we don't have enough stories that grab the essence of our young men where they say, that's me. They can identify, or at least it's speaking to something to which I can relate. So that's, in one instance, that's a call for more persons to create, accessible stories. Um, it's a call for us to support those stories, to find them, and I thank you for the work in which you're doing, so that it can become more accessible, right? So we have, as parents and trusted adults are looking to reach and engage young people as teachers and librarians, there's resourcing available for them to easily access something that's been vetted by experts as something that will be beneficial for engagement. So I think that's it. I think oftentimes, this is my own kind of soapbox, I think we place the issue of lack of engagement on the young people when it's really should be placed on us, right? That we're the ones who should be closing the gap in creating bridges to interest, right? And again, it could be just as much as it was for a lot of these young people, just seeing my face on the cover. And then also seeing, which is important, words. For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World is a long title. And even as, I was talking with the publisher about it, they're like, well, maybe you consider some other titles. They weren't really pushing against it, but it was like, that's a long title. And my argument was, the title, though, is subversive, and it's got to be there. I've got to have something to where a Black boy just picking up the book, even if he doesn't open up the book, he sees that he is beautiful.
Yes.
And is celebrated as such. I said, it's got to be there. You've got to have it. They said, okay, we understand. And I think it's been proven true that a lot of our young Black men, young Black boys, we robbed them of their innocence. We robbed them of their beauty. We don't celebrate them as, created in the image of God. And hopefully this is a small part of the corrective, small part of a corrective to that reality.
Yes, wholeheartedly. And that's one of the things I appreciated too, was just seeing beautiful Black boys and normalizing that together and seeing that is important. So I thank you. I want to thank you for your time so much. This has been great. And I hope when this gets out in a couple of weeks that, we have people that engage with this book more and ask questions. I would love to do a book club around this book in itself.
Listen, you name it, I'm there. I love to come and share. Anyone who wants to engage with me can hit me up on my website, michaelwwaters.com. I'm actually supposed to be coming to Boston sometime next year, if everything works out well, and would love to connect with you in the work that you're doing. But thank you for this invitation.
Thank you so much, and you have a good day. And thank y'all for, again, for those who will watch this, we are here, a literacy space for Black boys and young Black men. Thank you so much, and have a great future, because you are doing amazing things. I appreciate you wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Same to you, my sister. God bless.
All right, take care.